Hello and welcome to today's Paducah Human Rights Commission Raising the Standard. My name is Gary Reese. I'm a Paducah Human Rights Commissioner, and I have with me fellow Commissioner Gwen Taylor. And today we're going to be talking about voting rights, and we have with us today two esteemed guests. One is Ulla Schierhorn, who represents the Republican Party. She's also on the McCracken County Election Commission. And we also have with us Michael Murphy, who is the local Democratic Party chairman. And we're very happy to have you all with us today. I want to make I do want to clarify one thing. We're not going to be talking about partisan politics today, and we're going to focus on ways to help you all with the voting process. So that's our key theme for today. The first question is I'm going to ask you is the voting process is obviously a very important part of our American tradition. Can you elaborate on perhaps why, in a general sense, why that is so important to American citizens? And I'll let either one of you all go with that.
Well, I think it's extremely important. I always look at elections as a contest between ideas. It's a chance for voters and citizens to reaffirm everything that they hold dear. It's a chance to have a competition of ideas about what is good for our country, good for our community. It's a privilege to vote, and it's a privilege to pay for in blood and sacrifice. And so to me, it's a very, very important thing to do, and it's almost a historical duty to do.
Right. Okay.
Ulla? Well, it's important that everybody goes out to vote because our soldiers fought for the right to vote, and there's a lot of countries in this world where either women can't vote or people just are oppressed and by the governments and cannot vote. So we have that right and we should exercise it.
And you know, you touched on something there about women and their right to vote. Who is eligible to vote in this election?
Everybody is allowed to vote if you are registered. Let me rephrase that. You have to be a citizen first.
Okay.
And if you're a citizen, you are allowed to vote, and that goes for women, goes for naturalized citizens, it goes for, even if you're incarcerated and you are not convicted of a crime, you still have the right to vote. The only time you do not have a right to vote if you are mentally incapacitated or you are convicted of a crime and your voting rights were taken away. But otherwise, if you're 18 years or older and you are a natural born or a naturalized citizen, you have the right to vote.
Can we elaborate more
Absolutely.
on the mentally incapacitated? How is that, either one of you, can you elaborate a little more on that?
Part of my duties, my past life as county attorney, revolved around adult disability cases. Mm-hmm. If you've been adjudged by a jury of your peers that is no longer having decision-making capacity, you're impaired by court order, then one of the things that you lose is a right to vote, which makes perfect common sense. But it takes a court order, and when we have jury trials and juries make those decisions, then that judgment is provided to the clerk's office and people's names are purged. Mm-hmm. If you have an opinion that somebody is disabled, that's not enough to keep somebody from voting.
Okay, so they have to have been
It takes a
deemed
court order, yes,
Right.
ma'am.
by a court order. Okay.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about a little bit about the authority of the right to vote. Where is that in the law in terms of everybody? Obviously, that's written down somewhere, I guess. Can you elaborate just a little bit on that?
Well, I would hate to tell you what chapter and verse, but
Right.
the voting rights are protected by the United States Constitution. Mm-hmm. They're protected by the Kentucky Constitution. Okay. They're protected by numerous court decisions from the Supreme Court of the United States down to the Kentucky Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. So it's well-established law that citizens have a right, not just a duty, but a right to vote in elections.
Right. Okay.
And those rights are protected jealously by the court system.
Okay.
And we hear court decisions constantly in the news where a court someplace has stricken down some restriction or upheld some restriction based on their authority to regulate the protection of voting rights for citizens.
Okay. All right.
We touched on, again, in Ulla's previous statement, about those who are incarcerated but have not been convicted, and rights of voters, and House Bill 40, I believe, that was just recently passed, which allows felons who've been convicted and served their time to apply for an expungement and gain that right to vote back. Do you know anything at this point about whether that process has been in place where there will be some who were convicted of a felony that would be able to vote in this election?
Oh, absolutely. If you read news accounts, I think they've been overwhelmed. The estimates of the number of people they anticipated filing for this relief, and the numbers have been dramatically higher, which I think is a good thing. It means people make mistakes. Mr. Reese knows that from his past career, and I know that. But I also know most of those mistakes were stupid mistakes, most of them. There are evil people in the world, and we know that too. But the protocol established by House Bill 40 allows people to, if they qualify, to ask for a judge to basically expunge their conviction, set it aside, and which opens up the way to vote again. It's a judicial process. It has to be done in a public forum. It has to be application, so it's a little bit of paperwork. You have to want it to get it. But I don't believe there's a defense. If you meet the basic requirements, if you're eligible and you ask for it, the statute says the judge shall grant it.
Can you elaborate just a little bit on what, I'm sure these are limited to certain convicted felons. I'm sure it's not for everybody. Can you elaborate just a little bit on what?
I've not read the statute
Okay.
because I'm no longer practicing law.
Right.
But I have read the news accounts of it. It's Class D felons, nonviolent.
Right, okay.
And so if you're, it's typically if you hit petty thefts, I think what else?
Drug convictions.
Drug convictions are two that are the most common we see in the court system. Those are clearly, Class D felons are clearly eligible to vote.
Okay.
Clearly eligible to ask for relief, so they may vote.
Right, okay. All right.
And for those that are incarcerated, are they allowed to leave the jail to go vote, or?
No, they would have to request an absentee ballot by the county clerk, and then the county clerk sends it out wherever they are incarcerated at, and then they can send the paper ballot back. But if you're convicted of a crime, that's a different story, so you can't. But if you're just incarcerated and waiting for your trial, then you're still allowed to vote.
Okay. Well, I think this is probably a good time to talk a little bit about the absentee voter process. Could you explain to us just a little bit about, tell us what that is, and if somebody, what people are eligible, or who is eligible to do that, and maybe a little bit about the process.
Well, there's two different ways of, or there's actually several different ways, but the most common ways is if you're just out of town for the election day and you are around, like, say, the rest of the week, so you can go down to the courthouse. I think for this election, the absentee machine is going to be open on this coming Friday, and it's around noon. So anytime from around noon Friday till election day, you can go. Not on election day, but until election day, you can go down to the courthouse and vote absentee. We have two machines down there. One is called an e-slate, and the other one is an e-scan. And one of them, the e-slate, is for absentee voters who are handicapped, like if you're in a wheelchair and you cannot stand up, then you can, or blind or some other handicaps, you can use the e-slate machine, and the other ones have the e-scan machine. The most common way to apply for an absentee ballot is just you contact your courthouse, your county clerk, and they put you on a register, and then you will receive your absentee ballot in the mail. And that goes for if you're in the military or if you live overseas and are still allowed to vote in Kentucky or in the United States. And the other one is if you're in college. Or it also goes for nursing homes. If you're in a nursing home and you are not mentally incapacitated, we touched that before, then you can still vote absentee. And you can also have somebody help you with your absentee ballot. But there is I brought some forms, and it's very important that people read the instructions to come with the absentee ballot, because a lot of people forget to either seal the envelope correctly or don't sign the envelope correctly, and if it's not signed properly, we have to discard the vote. There is a law, and that breaks my heart every time we have to do that. So it's very, very important that you sign your envelope from the outside and you seal your envelope properly with your ballot inside. And if you have somebody help you, then you need 2 witnesses to sign the envelopes also. And it's not a very complicated process, but the instructions are very clear. So read your instructions and make sure that your vote counts if you go through all this trouble to request an absentee ballot.
Right, okay.
Gary, in McCracken County, you may contact our clerk's office at 270-444-4700, and they will mail you the application.
Right.
You also may contact Ms. Griggs by her email, which is julie.griggs@ky.gov, and they'll send you the application by mail. You can fill it out.
Okay.
And you can also apply for it online or by phone
Or in person.
or in person.
All right.
Or if you have your parents live here and you're away in college, your parents can actually apply for an absentee ballot for you.
Right.
Okay.
So there's a lot of ways to.
Okay. So if you had someone who lived in an assisted
Right.
living facility,
Yes.
and, you could get that for them
It
and
has to
take
be
it to
your
them.
relative, like a son or a daughter, or if you're away in college, your parents can do that, or same for the military.
So then, the requirements for voting. Let's talk a little bit about that for identification for voters in the election, and how that may work both in person and with an absentee ballot as well. What is required?
There's several things. You have several options. What they really would prefer is first choice is a photo ID, which is a driver's license, or a state-issued ID. If you don't have that, you can take a passport. You can take your birth certificate. If you don't have any of those, you can, if you're known by people who work at the polls, they can do an affidavit or statement that they know who you are and you can vote. If you don't have any of those, you can make out, I believe it's what is called a tentative vote. You can if you fill out an affidavit, make your ballot, they'll set it aside and they'll test the merits of it later. The system allows you several ways to do it. Each is a little bit harder as you go farther down the line. But if you have nothing, you still can vote, and then the validity of your registration will be checked later on, or your address will be verified. I'm not quite sure the protocol, but you can cast a vote, and they'll decide later whether or not it counts or not.
You can also use your Social Security card
I didn't know
or
that.
a credit card.
What about, does there have to be a photo though?
No,
No?
the
No
Social
photo?
Security card doesn't have a photo, and your credit card usually doesn't have a photo, but
Or your
there
birth
would
certificate.
also be.
Well, that was a misunderstanding I had because I thought it did have to be a photo.
No, we have
ID.
several voters who they forget their IDs, and then you just show them your credit card, and if your name is on there, that's also a valid ID.
So if someone is sending in an absentee ballot by mail, then how is the identification process?
Well, you have to request it by mail or by phone, or they probably have to have your Social Security number, and then they check the voter registration against your Social Security number, and if the information is correct,
Okay,
then they will
okay.
send it out.
Very good. Very good.
Let's talk a minute, if you don't mind, just about the registration process. And if you don't mind, explain that to us. And I guess the other question I have is do you have to be registered? How late can you wait to register for any given election?
Well, the last day for this election to register to vote is October 11th.
Okay.
And that's when the books close, and you can register by mail, or you can register in person if you fill out this card. And there is another way to register if you, how was that?
Secretary of State
Sec-
online.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's elect.ky.gov, right?
Well, I think it's govoteky.gov. .com will get you
.com,
close.
yeah.
It won't.
Right.
It won't get you to the actual website, but it'll get you the
Right.
links that will let you hook up. You do that at the Secretary of State's website. It's not real clear how to get there, but you can get there.
Okay.
Yeah, and the other one is elect.ky.gov, and that gets you to the Secretary of State website, and there is a link on there where that says go vote or vote, and that's a big bubble, and then you can register there. And I saw something yesterday. There is also a new thing on Twitter where you go Twitter and then add, and you put your information in your county, and they give you a link, and then they guide you through a process to register to vote.
So there's several different options, and obviously.
Yeah, and our Republican office has a little station where you can get your voter registration cards, and I think some of the churches around here might have it, or of course you can ask either of us representatives
Okay.
for a card, and then there's also a little table every Saturday at the library where you can sign up to vote.
I was
So
going to
there's
ask where
plenty
we
of-
could get where a person could get the cards to register to vote if they didn't have computer access.
Well, I get a lot of calls from people who know my name and say, you're on the election board, and I just send it out to them. But I usually tell them to go to the courthouse,
Courthouse, yeah.
Courthouse.
register in person. That's the easiest way.
The system has got multiple avenues for citizens. Everybody is desired to vote. And so the system has given you as many opportunities, as many tools, as many avenues as they can possibly think of, to include social media and websites. And so if you want to vote, you can vote.
You can vote,
Yeah.
yeah. And truthfully, people, if they haven't signed up, they haven't registered, as of today, for example, I guess they still have a couple of weeks until October 11th, you said.
Yeah,
So-
Yes.
October 11th
there's-
is the
there's
last day,
plenty.
yes.
Okay, all right.
And then once someone does register to vote, what is their next step in finding out where they go vote?
Well, usually the courthouse sends out a little card where you can, they tell you exactly where to go, but then you can also go online. And that little bubble again on elect.kentucky.gov, and it says where do I vote? And you put your name and your birth date in and your social security number, and that your voter registration comes up, and it tells you exactly where to go and where your voting place is.
In preparation for today, one of the things I was looking at some different areas and across the country. I think there are some efforts that are being made to try to extend the deadline for registration process. And I think there's even some efforts to try to make it up to almost the same day registration process as the election is. Do you foresee, or you think anything like that may happen anywhere in Kentucky? You foresee that happening in this state?
I'm not aware of any current legislation or pending legislation that would do that, but I think people who go to state government have a vested interest in citizens being good citizens. And so I think the desire is to make it easy, to expand it. I personally wouldn't mind voting take 2 or 3 days. I mean, be open for a long period of time, or especially open up the early voting. Now we have early voting as a way to do absentee ballots. I have no problem with early voting, period.
Okay.
Anything that makes it easy for working men and women to go vote, I'm for. And I think most people in Frankfurt would agree with that.
How about right now, is there like a rush, do you think, to sign up to vote now? Does it seem like maybe this year there's more potential for people registering for votes to vote as compared to years past?
We had a lot of people last year before the deadline to vote for in the primary. We had a big rush of people registering. And we even saw it before, and that's still ongoing. A lot of people are registering to vote, and I think it's a good sign, and it's very important. So, and I hope all those people who registered actually go out and vote.
Okay. All right.
Now, us political types start paying attention a year in advance.
Right.
Typical citizens who have normal day-to-day lives start paying attention 30 days out. And so I think it's a fairly normal phenomenon for people to start paying attention to the election, the issues, and if they're not registered to vote, to go do that.
Right, right, okay.
This is a question that I also had in my mind. I hear some people say that the upcoming election is one of the most important elections we've had in years. And then I hear others say, I'm so frustrated, I don't know if I'm even going to vote. From your perspective, do you have any insight as to how the turnout may be on Election Day this year for your respective parties?
Historically, presidential elections are always well attended, voted 60%, sometimes as high as 70%. Although I hear a lot of dissatisfaction among voters with their choices, they're still interested, and I think ultimately they're still going to vote.
Ulla?
Yeah, I
And
feel
that's my
the same
hope
way.
too.
Yeah. I hope people go out and vote because government doesn't work if people don't participate in it and vote. So
As a partisan, I can live with the result, and I've lived with the result all my life, and I'm proud to live with the result all my life. What I can't live is if nobody votes and 2 or 3 people decide for the rest of us, and that's our responsibility to make sure that does not happen.
right.
I agree.
I want to take just a moment and talk a little bit about the potential for not necessarily locally, because we know this probably not going to happen locally, but nationally, voter fraud. Is this something that we have seen here locally, or is this mainly things that we hear about in pockets here and there across the country?
Let me tell you what I know,
Okay.
and I'll be happy to listen to other
Right.
things too.
Okay.
Here in McCracken County, I'm not aware of any documented voter fraud. That's not to say that it's never happened. And
Right.
in the modern world, with the computer systems that we use to count votes, it's virtually impossible to game the system. To game the system, you would almost have to have an insider in the clerk's office, in the electors who monitor this system, the sheriff, the clerk's office. It'd be a massive conspiracy. It would revolve around absentee ballots. Now, beyond that, in eastern Kentucky, there's been lots of documented cases where people were bought and paid for, but that's not the system's fault. That's an individual gaming the system. Guy go up to you and give you $10 to vote for my guy. So those things I'm sure have happened and will continue to happen, but wholesale voter fraud, I think in Kentucky, is virtually impossible.
Right. So in other words, then, as far as the system goes, there's a lot of safeguards
Yes.
in effect that will pretty much prevent voter fraud, and then anything that goes on is going to be out here in the community. People maybe buying someone else's position to go and vote.
Yes, I've been involved in some recounts at the courthouse, and it always amazes me the level of sophistication, the redundancy. You have a paper ballot, you have an electronic count, you have numbers have to match the people who registered to vote. There's no way to stuff ballots in there. When you go in to register, you get a barcode to your individual vote. They can't identify you, but it's a unique. So there's no way to come in with 200 ballots that's pre-done and run through the machine. It simply can't happen.
Right.
And so I'm really confident that the results are fair and accurate. Now, there may be a glitch in the machine occasionally. And when the recount, when we ran papers through the second time, guys get in a hurry, they're pushing them in there. Sometimes they'll put 2 pieces of paper in at once, and so the numbers don't match 100%, but the results are always consistent, always.
All right.
You think it's that way across the country?
I hate to speak about what other people do and other things do. To the extent you don't have redundancy and you don't have computer systems, you have more human error, more human mistakes, I think you could have potential for voter fraud.
Sure. All right. I want to ask you all, if you don't mind, just taking a moment or two. We've got a few minutes left. Take a moment or two and explain the McCracken County Election Commission, and explain you all are representatives on that commission. So talk
I'm
about.
not,
yes.
she is.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. You're the Democratic chair
Yes.
for this area, but if you don't, but you're familiar with the commission.
Yes, because I worked elections for
okay.
the county attorney's office.
Okay. So if you don't mind, explain a little bit about what that commission, the purpose of the commission is, and what its role is, and that sort of
We
thing.
have our election board that consists of the county clerk, the sheriff, a representative for the Republican Party and a representative for the Democrat Party. And then we have some clerks that work with us, they take when we have board meetings, they take the minutes. And we set up the voting machines. We oversee the voting process. And when it comes, like on Friday, we open the voting machine for absentee voting, and the whole board has to be present to do that. And we have to sign off on every single voting machine. And then when it gets closer to re-election, we have 51 precincts, and every precinct has 2 machines, one e-slate and one e-scan machine. And we have the privilege or the fun, I should say, to inspect all those voting machines and make sure that all the names are programmed properly, because the names were actually programmed by a company named HARP, which is providing getting the voting machines from. And so there is no way that we can have any voter fraud in our area. There's just no way. There's so many safeguards in place. And
The board also, I think I'm correct, determines the validity of an absentee ballot, whether or not it's to be set aside and discarded.
right.
They are the citizens' eyes and ears on the process. They're up close, personal. You have 2 elected officials, Sheriff Hayden, who's Chief Law Enforcement Officer in McCracken County, Ms. Griggs, who has constitutional responsibilities for the election, representative of each party, and they work as a team, and they've worked well for as long as I've been in McCracken County. They work well as a team.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we have about a minute left. I want to ask you all, is there anything at all that we haven't discussed that we should say to the people out there about their right to vote and try to get them to actually go out and register before the deadline and things like that? Is there anything you would like to say to wrap it up?
A lot of people have gone through a lot of hard times to ensure that you have the right and privilege to vote. You owe it to yourself, you owe it to your children, you owe it to your father, your grandfather, your great-grandfather. I've been in places in the world where they didn't vote, and there were machine gun bullets on the walls where somebody with a gun tried to take over. We don't live in that kind of world, and I don't want to live in that kind of world. And we won't as long as we participate in our government.
Right. Okay, that's good. Ms. Schierhorn, would you?
There is one more thing I want to say. A lot of people vote straight party. Well, this year it's different because you can still vote your straight party, but we have city races, and we have school board races, and we have, I think Greenland has 1 judge's race. So if you vote straight party, you still have to vote for the other offices separately, because otherwise a lot of people think, well, I vote straight Republican or straight Democrat, and then walk out and I'm done, and they forget to vote for city or mayor or some of the
Nonpartisan.
school board offices.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank you all for being here with us today. It's been very insightful, and we really appreciate you all taking your time. And I want to thank you all for joining us today, and you have a very good day. Thank you.
Oh, and remember to vote. It's
That's
a
right.
right and a privilege.
That's right.
Right, and a
So on behalf of
privilege.
the Paducah Human Rights Commission, have a good day.